remarkable CV is extraordinary. And yesterday, the first day where she's actually returned to a venue and won, because her previous triumphs had been at all different racecourses. Her versatility, her courage, and not to mention her class, quite extraordinary, and set her apart as a modern great. She's trained by John Gosden, who's on the line now. John, good morning.
Morning.
So much upon which to reflect yesterday. You were kept extremely busy in interviews throughout the afternoon, but I suppose there's one thing you don't mind, and that's talking about another Innate victory. Quite extraordinary.
Yes, it is. She's actually about 25 yards from me, having a bit of grass grazing right now. She got back last night and ate all of her feed up. So it was interesting what Jim was saying. She races more like an old pro now, rather than the youthful exuberance of her 3-year-old years. She's a little more measured in everything, I think. But she seems in good order this morning, and Mr. Dettori came round. He looks pretty tired, actually, more tired than her.
He described himself yesterday, John, as being emotionally exhausted by the whole experience. Can you identify with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think despite the cheery front, he feels the whole weight of responsibility upon him, and he absolutely adores the fillies, so he wants to do things right by her. Interesting enough, he said she wasn't particularly happy with the soft ground down the hill into Swinley Bottom. He said she wasn't really quite where he wanted. He wanted to get in, couldn't get a position. He went from 4 wide to 3 wide, dropped back to 2 wide. You can't go around Swinley Bottom 3 and 4 wide, that's for sure. And I think to that extent, he said she came good. As soon as she started climbing out of Swinley Bottom, she suddenly locked back on with it, which is probably why he came from third last right up to contest the lead so quickly at the head of the straight.
Struck me that much has been made of the fact that Frankie barely touched her with the stick. What do you think was going through his head there?
Well, I think it's maturity as a jockey, and when you really understand the horse and know the horse you're riding, and you know they're stretching and giving you everything, that's why you go one flick to get her stretching, and then it's sort of just waving the stick. And I think he probably felt he had it under control, and it depends. I mean, we're not getting into a stick debate now.
Definitely
but,
not.
You want to keep a horse balanced. It's very important. And of course, the stick is an important, to me, it is a key ingredient. But if your horse is balanced and stretching, you're not really going to do much good by giving him a slap. You're much better stretching with the horse and keeping them balanced in that situation. He knows it well. She was in full flight. He wasn't really going to disturb that, is probably the long and short of it.
When Crystal Ocean really started digging in and grinding in on the fence, was there ever a moment from your vantage point that you thought you might be in trouble?
Yeah, very much so. I think Stouty and I are probably feeling the same thing at that critical moment, just at the 1 marker, and just around that point that he was. And as I said before on Monday in the interviews, he's a magnificent horse, and he is all heart and talent. I thought he was singly impressive in the Prince of Wales at Royal Ascot, and I could see this wasn't going to be easy, And he's down there on the rail. He's had a nice run through from a good draw. He's been beautifully ridden and placed. So it was bound to be a battle. And yeah, but that's what top class racing is all about. And when you get something of that nature, a duel, literally a duel, the whole length of the straight there with everyone shouting, that's the best of our game. But it certainly was a Chapman Wall. And
you mentioned that she's racing more like an old pro now. Does that mean, do you think that we're unlikely to see one of those displays that characterised her 3-year-old season, where she was drawing right away from horses and really putting them to the sword? Do you think she knows that she just needs to do what she has to do? She's put the field to the sword, but so's he. Yeah. I think they are the two best. As I said before, we got the Derby winner and the horses with him. You've got, obviously, the best older horse in Europe and the world. You've got the best one coming out of France, and she's the best female race mare. And, they are showing a clean pair of heels from the rest of that field. The 3 of them, let's be clear about that. So, when you're beating slightly inferior opposition, it's a whole lot easier to be skipping away. But that was a race testing every sinew. And I know, John, that you've had so much experience, you don't like getting carried away with these things, but would it be fair to say that she's taken you on a more interesting and satisfying journey than any other racehorse that you've trained? Yeah, I think so. And I think, as everybody knows, she's come back from
injury surgery last year, and then from a week of sickness between her Kempton race and the Arc. And she's just shown such amazing mental strength, which is why I slightly alluded to the fifth set at Wimbledon, and it's 12 games all. It's the sort of Djokovic, Federer, and Nadal. These guys are so mentally strong, and both she and Crystal Ocean showed that is so much a component of what a great athlete is.
And we know that the thoroughbred can be an innately fragile creature as well, and there's a real poignant sense of grim irony, in a sense that she continues apace, and we tragically lost Sea of Class this week, the filly that had given us such a great battle in the Arc last year, and the horse that you trained to such great effect last year, Roaring Lion. He's on the critical list down under, just having had colic surgery. It does give us a reminder that these horses are flesh and blood and have their own innate fragilities. Yes, I mean, obviously in the case of Sea of Class, it was an important tragedy with her getting cancer. It really is, but we're always remembered, just reminding how ephemeral life is, that's for sure. Yeah, exactly. That's a much better way of putting it, and obviously we're thinking of her, and the news of Roaring Lion. It sounds perhaps more positive than it was last night. I know we're going to get an update from David Redvers very shortly. I know nothing about that, so you've rather shocked me with that news. I'm so sorry, John. Yeah, he suffered an attack of colic last night in New Zealand. And they've suspended stallion duties in New Zealand for the time being, and I think the plan is to get him stabilised and then to bring him back to Tween Hill. So apologies for surprising you with that. Yeah, I didn't know that at all. Just dropped this morning, but he's a lovely horse. He's mentally strong. He got better as the season went on, bigger and stronger. So let's hope he can come through this one. It's a long old fight down there. He had an amazing season last year. He was campaigned very boldly, and he answered every call. How bold are you inclined to be now with Innate from here to the end of 2019? Well, she'll tell us. She's very expressive, and she'll tell us what she wants to do. I mean, whether we talked about it yesterday, actually, and Teddy Grimm talked as well, whether we go to York or whether we just go straight to the Arc. But I think we'll start making those decisions in the next week. And if she does go to York, would you favour your route of the Yorkshire Oaks to the Arc, or would you like to have a go at the Juddmonte? Well, she's in both races, but so that would be a later decision. You're training for the same meeting, so that makes it fairly easy. But I think the key thing is whether she goes to York at all, or whether we just do the other thing you can do, just freshen her up and bring her up. She runs well fresh, bring her up to the Arc without having taken any risks in going anywhere else. And looking ahead to Goodwood this week, Stradivarius, another horse who's essentially public property now, much like Innate is, but a horse probably you can enjoy maybe more in a more sort of shackle-free way. Well, yes, I was with Mr. Nielsen yesterday, who bred him, and yes, you can. He's a horse that you can really enjoy those cup horses, and he's been fantastic in the way he's fought his way through 2 seasons. Obviously, he carries a lot more weight here because the 3-year-olds come into the race and they're getting a lot of weight, so we know about that. He won it as a 3-year-old. So, the demand of the race, it will be severe enough on him, and I'm sure they'll probably make a strong pace of it, but he stays, so he's in great form. He's just been out here in front of me having a good trot, and he's playing, and he looks to be really enjoying life at the moment, so let's hope it goes well on Tuesday for him. Well, that's great news, and fantastic to hear Innat's in great shape and 8 up last night. John